All right, welcome back. We're on day 5 now. We're getting close to the end. And today we're going to talk, by the way, I'm Michael Rosmer. This is Richucation. I'm excited to have you guys here. Now, today we're going to talk about a subject that really, for a lot of people, a lot of people I meet, they've got kind of the first 3 in line, but they've hit a ceiling. They go up, maybe you have a successful job. Maybe you've got a business that's doing pretty well, but you're kind of stuck at some level. We're going to talk about breaking through that, and we're also going to talk about the other piece, which is the first part of really how to gain freedom of your time. I've succeeded when I was 28 years old for the first time in being able to really have a kind of that goal of freedom that I talked to you guys about at the beginning, where my time was my own. I could literally work, it was about an hour a week, something like that. An hour, 4 hours, I can't remember exactly, but something like that, and have a reasonable income coming in at the time, which was pretty cool. Now, big impact. That's what we're going to talk about, okay? I have a quote that I got it somehow from a mentor indirectly, and it was, you don't get big doing small deals. All right, if you want to get big, you got to do big things. It's very, very challenging to go and to fold napkins every day and become really successful by doing so. You can all relate to that, right? You can relate to the fact that you can spend a day doing lots and get nothing done. Does that make sense? And how much better do you feel when you do little and got a lot done? That's what this is all about. It's all about the concept that once you've made that money, once you've found a way to become profitable, and this is really kind of the flow of business, right? So the first thing that you have to do in business is you have to figure out how to become profitable, predictably. So you're going to make a sale. Making a sale isn't enough. You have to do it consistently. Now once you do that, you've got like the foundation point, which is really good. Now you have to figure out how to grow it. And certain businesses definitely grow better than others. Certain jobs definitely grow better than others. And that's all around really a combination of 3 things, okay? So a lot of people, they'll get fixated on kind of the channel. It's like, should I blog? Should I have YouTube? Should I open a restaurant? Should I sell clothing? Should I, all these things. That's not the point. You're missing, if your goal is to build wealth, if your goal is to become rich, the key isn't in any of those things. The key is here. How many people do you influence? How significant is your influence on them, your impact on them, and how much competition is there? Those 3 things together basically create a formula to determine where you'll end up being. All right? So you need to have more people that you're impacting, you need to impact them in a bigger way, and you need to do that ideally in a place that has minimal competition. I'm going to do an example of that. Okay, let's say, this is an example I'm going to borrow from a guy, Mike Dillard. He gave the example of you've got a waitress or a waiter. How much money do they make? Not very much. How come? Well, how many people do they influence? Not very many, right? In a given night, I've never been involved in that industry, but I imagine it's 20, 30 people in a night, something like that. How big an influence and impact do they have on those people? Pretty small, right? It's not that significant. So you brought them food. You took an order for them. Taking an order is something they could have done on their phone for free, in theory. And having the food brought to them, it's really not that valuable. On the other hand, let's look at a surgeon, okay? So a surgeon, how much money do they make? A lot more than a waiter. Why? Well, they still impact a small number of people. They cannot do many operations. But how significant is what they're doing for those people? Really significant, especially if it's like heart surgery or brain surgery. It could be saving somebody's life. So of course they get paid more for that. On the flip side, let's look at somebody like Tony Robbins. All right? Tony Robbins, how many people does he influence? Thousands. Like, I went to a Tony Robbins event earlier this year, and the room was packed with, I don't know, thousands of people. 6,000 people maybe? Something like that. I think those were roughly the numbers. So you have 6,000 people at one event. How much influence is he having on them? It's not as much as a surgeon, but it's less, but it's more than the waiter. So somewhere in there, but over 6,000 people. So it just adds up to such a big value. And when you can reach people on the internet, and so you look at Amazon, Jeff Bezos, how many people do they have as customers? Millions of people. When you're influencing millions of people, you can make millions of dollars. Facebook, billions of customers, over 1 billion Facebook active users. So it's not really surprising that Facebook makes in profit over $1 billion a year. You only need $1 per person on that basis, right? So I hope that logic kind of makes sense to you. Now, it's nice to say that, but the question is, great, how do we do it? So we're going to talk about really 2 different sides to this. And again, we go into a lot of detail on a lot of different pieces for you. But I want to focus for today on 2 things. And the one is personal productivity. So we'll write that down, productivity. And I apologize, my writing is very poor. Productivity. And then we'll go into the next one in a moment. So what's productivity all about? I've read a bunch of articles on it that mostly miss the mark. And the reason is they focus on, if you've ever heard of the concept of 80-20, they focus on the 80% of effort that gets you 20% of the results instead of the other way around, which interestingly is a big productivity tip. So look at somebody like Steve Jobs. This is, to me, one of the best examples. Steve Jobs, here's what he did. He basically did the equivalent of building 4 billion-dollar companies from scratch. So he built Apple from nothing to over $1 billion. Then he got kicked out. He went and he started Next, and he bought Pixar. Next didn't go quite to $1 billion. It sold to Apple for something like $500 million, but we'll count it as a $1 billion company. Pixar sold to Disney for something like $9 billion, $7 billion, somewhere in that range. And then he went back to Apple, which was on the verge of bankruptcy, and took it to being the most valuable company in the world. Pretty impressive, right? Like, not a lot of people have a 4 times success rate like that. And he disrupted multiple industries. By all accounts, Steve Jobs was a productive person in the sense that he produced a lot. He had a big impact in the world, right? Elon Musk is another great example. What do these people have in common? You can actually go online, you can watch this video of Steve at the Next meetings, and he had this really interesting thing. He spends this whole time, he has a board there, and he's focusing on what are our top priorities. If you read Elon Musk's biography, which is fantastic, I highly recommend it. I've read it recently. Actually, the Steve Jobs biography I really enjoyed as well. I would recommend that one to you as well. When you listen to what Elon is about, Elon's all about what is the highest priority activity. And he's all over that activity. Doesn't matter who else is assigned to it, he's on whatever is the highest priority. That's high impact. Is setting the table ever high impact? No, never. Not hardly ever, never. Ever, ever, ever. Is doing the laundry high impact? No, it's just not. You're not making a big difference in the world by doing that. Is solving a major problem that's going to, help millions of people high impact? Yes. Is doing something that's going to save somebody's life high impact? Yes. Is saving lots of people's time, so Steve was famous for he had done this activity, and I'm not going to draw it out, but I'll pretend to do it for you. He was in this position where he was working with somebody and he wanted them to reduce the boot time on, I think it was the iPhone. And they said, it can't be done. He said, well, if somebody's life was at stake, depended on it, could you do it? He said, well, yeah, if somebody's life depended on it. He went and he got up onto the board and he wrote down the number of iPhone users and multiplied it by how many times they would have to boot and calculated that it was going to save, the amount of time was the equivalent to saving, 17 people's lives or something like that. And so that's just a great example of impact, right? Doing that thing saved quite a bit. There's a big impact in that grand scheme of things. If you can save 1 million people $100 a year, will you have a high impact? Yeah. It's not $100 a year isn't a lot of money, but you're doing it for 1 million people, so that's $100 million of savings over the course of the year. That's big impact. And we're talking about in monetary terms, but what about in terms of movies? So if you look at sports stars, for example, sports stars from a century ago had better batting averages, say in the case of baseball, than they do today in some cases. But they made a lot less money. Why? TV. TV has meant that they impact a lot more people. Now we have the internet, of course, as well. And so by having that bigger influence, that bigger audience, it invariably happens. It invariably means that you can reach a lot more people. By reaching a lot more people, you can have a lot bigger impact, and by having a lot bigger impact, you make a lot more money. So productivity is about doing high impact tasks. Steve didn't come in saying, okay, let's, fold the napkins. At least not the majority of his time. And so it's not about coming in earlier in the morning. It's not about something like that. It's about picking activities that are going to have a high impact. And waking up every day and saying, what's the highest impact thing that I can do today? At every hour, looking at, okay, what can I do that's higher impact? Now, an interesting tool around that, and this is one of the things that I did that really helped to free up my time, I was telling you earlier about how little time I had to work, was eliminate the unnecessary. Okay, this is a big one. A lot of people, they focus on doing things more efficiently. They'll say, how do I manage my email more efficiently? Well, a better way is just have less email. If you have less email, you don't even have to manage it that efficiently, and you can get there. Which is, so go and unsubscribe from mailing lists. Go and just get used to not responding to a lot of emails. Have filters on there. Do things like this. And so one of the things I did was I stopped answering the phone for the most part. I stopped answering a lot of texts. I stopped answering a lot of email. I unsubscribed from a bunch of things. I basically just eliminated a whole bunch of things that I would normally do from my life. And by doing that, all of a sudden you have all this extra time. Because normally you would have spent an hour on Facebook. Now what do you have? You have an hour. Wonderful. Now you can put that into a higher impact activity. So elimination is a highly underrated piece of productivity. Possibly the most important in terms of kind of freeing up time. Because you're doing something with your time. So to do something different with it, you have to eliminate something that you're doing now. Maybe that's watching TV, maybe it's reading the news. That was one of the things I cut. I didn't read the news, read the news. And you can basically audit your time, okay? So just go through and record every day what it is you're doing. I did a time study. I had a coach who got me to do a time study for a week. I was like, oh, this is very interesting. I can see how come I have the results that I do based on this time study. And based on that, you can correct. So just something to apply in your life in terms of productivity. The next thing is being able to focus. When you are focused, and this comes back to elimination, when you're focused, you're going to get a lot more done. Okay? Now, how do you focus? In my experience, the best way to focus is just to eliminate distractions. Distractions are going to pull me this. So if I turn off my phone, I'm not distracted, so I'm more likely to focus. If I don't have other windows open or ads that are popping up that are getting me to click on them or something like this, I'm more focused. If I don't have clutter on my desk that's distracting me, whatever the distraction is for you, just eliminate those from your environment. When you're in a cleansed environment, you'll find you focus more and more easily. So that's another little tip. In terms of identifying what's highest impact, and that's something you have to do, but we're going to talk about it a little bit now in terms of business and market and things like this. So that's the second part, is we talk about big impact here. The next part of big impact is, how much room does your company have to go? And so this is great for somebody who's maybe looking at starting, right? We talked before about, okay, you're going to go out, you're going to find something that people who you know are interested in, things like this. But what there is there's kind of a matrix. And so this is, I guess, what we'll call scale. How big can it grow? All right? This is really determined by looking at, first of all, what's the market size and what's the competition? Remember we talked about that competition thing? So in theory, if there's 10 restaurants all serving the same group of people, then that's going to mean they each can get more than if there's 20. Obviously, the person who's getting, the restaurant that's doing best is going to have a higher percentage and things like this, but more competition cuts down on it. And so if you want to decrease competition, you either have to differentiate, come up with something different in a compelling way, or you want to go into an area where there's big market size, so you have the ability to grow a lot. That was the thing about Steve. So if we go back to Steve Jobs, Steve Jobs talked about how he likes to be involved in things that affect a lot of people. And so if you're doing something that doesn't affect a lot of people, for example, when I wrote my first books, my first books, I had studied magic, like sleight of hand, magic tricks. And I wrote these books on a really specific area of magic. Now, there's only 150,000 or so magicians worldwide. And I was targeting like a really narrow group of them. Let's say 15,000. So what's the maximum that I can grow to? 15,000 sales. Am I going to get that? Probably not. Maybe I get 10%. I don't remember how much I actually got, but it was small. I didn't break even. It was, from a financial standpoint, it was a horrible experience, but it was a really great experience. It's a life experience. So how big is your market? And this is why, by the way, if you look at, there's two groups of people who tend to be the young, wealthy people on the Forbes list. They are people in technology, like internet-type companies, and people in finance. Why? Because they can scale very quickly with relatively low cost. And this is where the second part comes in. When you're looking at designing your business, kind of the business model, pay attention to how much skill is required to do this and how much labor. So as a general rule, service-based businesses don't scale very well versus a product business. So a product business is going to scale better. Second of all, pay attention to how much capital is required. So if it costs a lot of money to grow, for example, let's compare Amazon to Barnes & Noble or a similar bookstore chain. When Barnes & Noble was getting going, maybe you put a store there, you can reach 100,000 people. In order to reach more people, you have to build a second store. That's a cost. Maybe it costs, let's say it's $1 million to build a store. I don't know what it would be for one of their stores, but let's say that was the number. So every time you want to reach another 100,000 people, you got to spend another $1 million. Versus Amazon, they build their digital store once, and they can reach hundreds of millions of people like that. And that's like this huge, huge advantage. So pay attention to that. Pay attention to, okay, where can I have a big impact by being able to reach a lot of people? And where am I going to be that I can scale quite quickly? Now, a part of that is doing big deals. So I really learned this from a mentor who was in the oil business. They sold steel pipe to big oil companies. And their deals were like multi-million-dollar deals. It's very hard to make a lot of money selling 1-cent items. It's possible, but it's hard. Versus if a customer is worth to you, and this is what I pay attention to, what is a customer worth? If a customer is going to be worth, especially over their lifetime, $1 million, it's pretty easy to make a fair amount of money that way. If a customer is worth $10, pretty hard. So you got to get a lot of customers, and chances are it's going to cost you more than $10 to get those customers. So pay attention to those pieces. We're going to talk later when we talk about our last point about a really powerful way to scale. And it's the heart of becoming wealthy and becoming rich, and it's a powerful, powerful, powerful piece of advice. But the other one is growing and compounding. So this is, for a lot of people, you might just have a job, and that's fine. Again, I would recommend you have a business on the side, but maybe you're just going to have a job. You can invest your money and have it grow for you. I would look at my grandmother as an example. My grandmother was a very poor lady for a lot of her life. She'd grown up in the Great Depression at the time when her husband died when my mom was 14. And they moved into an apartment where they literally had cardboard boxes for furniture because they couldn't afford it. But by the time she died, she had like $500,000. What happened? Well, she didn't spend very much, so she followed our second rule really well, and she just invested it. She wasn't even good at investing it. She just gave it to the bank and let them do it. And it grew over time. It just compounded, so that she had something to give at the end, and she was able to be in a pretty good position. Unfortunately, she didn't live that way, but so she, we wish that she had been able to take advantage of it more. But the point is, there definitely was this growth that came from making smart decisions about compounding. So compounding your money is really important. And if you're going to invest, probably the easiest place to invest, there's going to be two options for you that I'm going to give you when you're starting out anyway. And later on we'll discuss it. I really encourage you to go to richucation.com. We have lots of information on investing. But for those who are starting out, there's Warren Buffett's advice. Warren Buffett's advice for the average person is buy an index fund of the S&P 500, usually from Vanguard. So you want the lowest fees possible. So an index fund of the S&P, and put your money there, 90% in there, 10% in some sort of government bonds. The alternative is the Ray Dalio philosophy, which is in Tony Robbins' book, Money Master the Game. And he talks about an asset allocation mix, which is also it's a very safe way to go that provides fairly decent returns. So those would be my suggestions to you for today. You're going to compound what it is that you earn by investing it. And in terms of looking at how do you grow and scale more, focus on some way that you can do something that's going to reach a lot more people, have a lot more value, and ideally be in a position where you have low competition. And then pay attention to the productivity steps. Eliminate extra stuff, extra things that you're doing, and focus more. If you have those two things, although those are only part of the equation for sure, we could spend an entire day on productivity. Just eliminating and focusing are going to help you a ton. I hope you have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoy applying those. Again, rhythm creates results. So go out, try applying this, make some corrections, come back, get the next piece of knowledge. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the way that I was able to go from being broke to actually doing really well and have freed up my time, having to work 2 hours a week or whatever the number was. It's going to be powerful. We'll see you next week, or tomorrow.